Welcome, everybody. This is AlphaDelta, a podcast where we have conversations with people operating at a higher level than most, with the hopes that it motivates and inspires people to become the best version of themselves. So today, I'm really excited. This is the first episode of 2024. It's also the first in-person episode, and for our viewers out there, whether it's um, online in video form or in audio, like you might notice that the audio is a bit different. The video is also quite, a lot better, and that's because we're currently working with Summerbox. So the good folks of Summerbox are working with us to just shoot this episode and hopefully a lot of future episodes. Right. So today, my guest is a good friend of mine. It is Winston Reid. Winston is somebody who inspires me in a lot of ways, and we've actually hanged out. We've had a lot of very interesting conversations over time. So I'm very excited to have him on the pod today. And, Winston, for those who don't know who you are, could you just, introduce yourselves, tell us who you are, where you're from, what do you do, and where do you go to school?
Sure, 100%. So first and foremost, thank you for having me, Joe.
Of course.
I actually am, I think, even more inspired by you and the things that you're doing here in the media space. So bravo to you very strongly. And yeah, so for those who may not know me, my name is Winston Reid. I am the founder and CEO of a VC-backed company called Alvin Technologies. And we do embedded enterprise SaaS, meaning software as a service software for banks and asset managers, ultimately across Africa, but our initial focus is on banks and asset managers in Kenya and Nigeria. To the other parts of your question around where I'm from, so I'm very proudly someone who has really enjoyed my life here in Kenya. I've been here for now 5 years, but I'm originally actually from Chicago. So I'm very proudly from the South Side, born and raised to two wonderful parents who are also born in the U.S. My father being from Wisconsin, my mom from New Jersey. Although my father's parents actually are from Jamaica, so they immigrated to the United States from Jamaica. But otherwise, typical, I think, Black American family.
Right.
I went to Miami University, which, despite its name, is not in Florida. It's in the southwest of Ohio. And yeah, I've been now in Africa, though, as a continent. So, like I said, Kenya for 5 years, but Africa as a continent for a bit over eight.
8 years. Right. Nice. Nice. All right. Awesome, man. Thanks for the great introduction.
Yeah,
Right.
sure.
Very, yeah. But okay. So my first question for you is, like, what are you passionate about and why?
Yeah, sure. So, I think the arc of my passion, really ever since high school, has been very consistent, even though it's manifested in different ways in the course of my life slash career. And that is, I've really always been focused on finding ways to be some form of a catalyst to democratize access to resources and opportunities for, at first, Black folks in the Black world. Even though I'm not. I mean, as you heard, I'm not directly, say, Kenyan or Nigerian, but I am I'm very proud to be a Black person here, and I am very passionate about advocating for the needs of the global Black community. That really has been the crux of my passion, and that really comes from, I think, two particular areas. So, like I mentioned, I am very grateful to have been born to the parents as well as my siblings, the family that I was born into. And one notion that was very important and remains very important to my family, and I think a lot of frankly Black American families, and I know like a lot of families in general, but
Hmm.
I think that the character that this comes from in our family, I think to some degree it might be a bit particular in terms of like the Black American story in the U.S. and just the suffering that we as a people came from and so forth, and where we now are today. This notion that with great with great privilege comes the necessary requirement that you will carry the baton forward in some unique way. Like,
Right.
as in, it's not an option.
Hmm.
There are a lot of folks who I see who have a lot. I mean, they were born with different levels of privilege, and they tend to be just focused on themselves. And I think that's totally incorrect. I think, fortunately, this. I mean, like I said, that concept was interwoven in my upbringing. And so, with me being focused in software and trying to help more Black and Brown folks, and now thinking about how can we help people even across the emerging market world? How can we help people actually get across the finish line to their financial goals, namely, say, to buy land?
Hmm.
um, that at first came from just this idea that you have to figure out some area where your unique talents, your unique gifts can be leveraged to help people who otherwise may not have as many privileges as you were given. So that is the basis for it. Is
Right.
just great upbringing by my parents, and taking great pride on
Hmm.
seeing that really as an honor, frankly. The second piece, see how I can say this concisely. So the truth is, ever since I was 3 years old, I went to a Montessori school.
Oh, interesting.
Montessori, for those who may not be familiar,
Yeah.
is a system. It's a educational setup where you have different stations that you can go to.
Mm,
And I went to the international station in my little Montessori area. I went to the international station every single day, and I
mm,
learned. I just heard different sounds, and these, I was told were different languages, and I was also shown different places, different countries. I mean, I was 3. I don't want to overstate how aware or astute I was as a. I mean,
right.
I'd only been on the planet for 36 months,
Right.
but I did find, I even now I do find that interesting how in seeing all these different possibilities or options that I could have chosen, I chose the international section every day. I was just
Mm,
fascinated with this idea that there are other people in the world who have different beliefs, different cultures, just different ways of living. And if I learn new sounds, I can make new friends with them. I
right.
just that I actually do
Yeah.
remember very distinctly. I just thought that that was
Hmm.
super cool. And so that from 3 years old, starting my career, I guess in that way. From then on, I gravitated towards opportunities that enabled me to get exposure
Right.
to international work in whatever form. So in high school, really taking foreign language seriously, and really enjoying learning French as my chosen language. And then in college, doubling down in that, and then I spent some time in Senegal where I was there for 6 months. And I expanded an organization that I started in the US. We were trying to establish the francophone version for that operation over there, and then that's where I really just realized this is the pocket that I want to be
Hmm.
in long term, as far as being in between the anglophone and francophone world, but working with just really awesome people who have drive to really impact the world in a way that I think is very important.
Right.
And that passion just has proliferated, or otherwise, it's just grown a lot on the course of the past number of years.
Right, right. That's interesting. I think from what I'm getting is this just this consistent like curiosity
Yeah,
throughout like, your childhood, throughout just even your career, and then just also just like a commitment to, I would say, for lack of a better phrase or term, like I guess empowering like,
mhm.
people from like people of color, right?
Mhm.
And just like sort of whether it's providing resources or access or any sort of facility to just help with that empowerment along the process, right? So I actually want to just like, you sort of touched about this in your previous response. I actually want to sort of just dive a bit deeper into it, right? And that's like, on your childhood, right?
Sure.
Talked a lot about like the things you were curious about. Like, just give us a bit more, like, what are the things like did you enjoy doing? Like, what is it like growing up, especially like in Southside Chicago? Like what was that like? Like all those like various aspects to it.
Sure. Well, I first, I first do want to highlight the fact that, yeah, especially being not being in the U.S. Right now, say for this conversation, I do want to make sure that viewers are aware that when I say South Side, so the South Side of Chicago is quite a big region,
Right.
and so I didn't grow up at, say, where Kanye West
Right.
was. Yeah, like
Yeah.
I grew up in a really great, predominantly Irish Catholic neighborhood called
Mm,
Beverly Hills.
right.
Wonderful, just like the strong values, middle class American neighborhood. I went to public school for grammar school, and then I went to a Jesuit private school for high school. And yeah, I mean, in terms of the things that how do I say this? Like, how do I characterize my childhood? I think it was similar to what a lot of kids globally experience in terms of,
Right.
you're trying to figure out how to do your best in school at the same time as excel as best as you can in sports. Figure out as a straight guy, like how to interact with girls.
Right.
Just all those typical things I went through. And then also I would add, though, on top of that, I also come from um, a pretty pretty fundamentalist Christian home. So
Mhm.
it's kind of hard to label it, frankly, because there are some kind of like core beliefs of my family, or where one could say that they're actually rather liberal, but in other areas a bit more conservative.
Right.
And that, I would say, in thinking back through my childhood, my relationship with faith was
Mhm.
probably the most difficult aspect to it.
Right.
My mother is the well, she's been a pastor at a number of different Methodist churches throughout Chicago. My father, he's a lawyer, but he's a written, how do I say this? He's a published author
Right.
as an apologist. in defense of Christianity.
Mm.
And I am very grateful for a lot of the tenets of faith that I think are correct for everyone to follow. In the same way that I mean, I'm not Muslim, for example, but when I lived in Morocco for a couple of years, I lived in Senegal, like I said, as well for 6 months, and really got to understand some of the virtues, some of the real core tenets that are embedded within that faith. Or
Right.
when I was in Thailand, I spent a summer there working at a newspaper, and I got to better understand their different religious orientations. And so I think there are a lot of virtues that a lot of different approaches to life have, that a lot of people can learn from and adopt. But in my case, it was singularly the truth of Jesus Christ, which
Mm.
for me was what became a difficult relationship, because I was just so. I don't know if this is deviating from the question, but
Mhm.
this is something that I think about. I think a lot about when it comes to my childhood, because it otherwise was very healthy. I mean, I love my family, and very grateful for who they are, and how I've turned out because of them, right? In
Mhm.
part, but this was very very difficult for me
Right.
because I didn't. I it wasn't until ultimately, I know this is beyond now childhood, but it wasn't until I was ultimately 26 that I kind of just fully accepted that I don't agree with some core components of the faith, namely that even just the idea of any particular group of humans feeling a monopoly on truth and virtue
Right.
and orientation towards justice.
Mhm.
I disagree with that. There are also a number of components in the Bible that I don't support, and so yeah. While again at a high level, wonderful childhood. Um, my relationship with faith and navigating different orientations to belief in God was a pretty key component of that journey.
Right.
And now actually is a part of my mission as well. I mean, it's not
Mhm.
like it's not the core focus. The
Mhm.
core focus is to leverage what I call like the gospel of software. And this
Right.
idea that a few really competent people can build a solution that can exist in the cloud and can be deployed across millions of people's devices and
Right.
can help a lot of people get to their goals. I mean, I just find that so freaking cool. I
Yeah.
mean, like
No, it
it's kind
is.
of awesome. But then the underbelly of that too, and something that it's kind of on the side, but I am very passionate about it. Is helping to create safe spaces for those who are skeptics in different forms, who are questioning their faith or don't feel connection with whatever their namely religious orientation might be, and might be wondering, can I be a good person if I don't subscribe to certain components to it?
Right.
I really want to support those people and also hopefully through my example,
Right.
as I advance, show people that actually you can have fundamental disagreements with an orientation that you might have been inculcated with, and you can still not only be a good person, but you can have extraordinary character. You can live with integrity and
Mhm.
and justify it by way of secular means.
Right. Right. Makes sense. Makes sense. All right. So just want to switch gears a bit. You sort of highlighted this, in your previous introduction and even in your childhood, right? It's just more or less talking about like your career path, right?
True.
Like that journey you went through, right? So, my next question is like, can you just tell us a bit about that career path? Based on what you said earlier, obviously there's a lot of experiences you went through, living in Morocco, Senegal. Like, can you just walk us through just like your whole entire career path till like where you are today?
Yeah. So, like I was saying before, I mean, I think at base, I have always had like just a very, very, very deep thirst for adventure,
Right.
and also being at what I consider to be the fringe of just, or how do I say this? Being at the precipice of
Mm,
extremely exciting, massive opportunity.
right.
I mean, there's. I mean, I love my country, and I think there's a lot of really cool things that are happening there. Like a lot of opportunities that are being created, and I think that's awesome. But I literally ever since I think maybe high school is when it started really kind of crystallizing in my mind. Like I really want to get over to Africa. Like I really wanted to be based somewhere in the Black world and find sustainability there in terms of like lifestyle, but also in terms of craft, like the
Mhm.
work that I was doing. And um and upon arriving at first to Senegal, I went to Senegal during college. I had an interesting experience where, like I was referring to it a little bit earlier, but I'll share more color now. I had an interesting experience where I just realized this is totally the pocket that I want to be in. So,
Mm.
like I was saying, I had started an organization called the Global Collective in
Right.
college.
Interesting.
At the beginning, it was a international academic journal. I wanted to create an outlet that young people across the world could use to publish their treatises on how different things should be run in their countries, or otherwise their thoughts on different things. It then evolved into a platform that was intended to be for startups in emerging markets
Right.
to be able to have locally specific reference points to help them understand how to navigate the startup journey. I went to Senegal though to, like I said, establish the French bureau for this organization, and had galvanized 17 exactly. It was 17 um, francophone African students
Right.
to come be a part of this project for free. I don't know. I still kind of I still don't know how we managed to pull that
Yeah.
off, but
Mm.
in that experience, even though I mean, actually, at the end, we published our major publication,
Right.
but ultimately the venture failed. And
Mhm.
I remember in my mind just feeling such an automatic association between the failure of this thing and my utility, my worth
Mm.
as an individual, my worth especially as a man, and thought that I had failed the team. I had I just I thought that it was by definition categorically a failure. But I remember speaking to a number of my colleagues, and I'll never forget like just how emphatically, I mean, as in my colleagues, I mean, colleagues from the English bureau, the bureau in the U.S. as well, but especially colleagues over in the francophone one, because these were all black francophone African teams
Right.
or African team, and I remember them making it so clear how much they appreciated that experience and how it
Mm.
expanded their thinking. And as in like so we recruited from this local law school,
Okay.
and so these were students who were otherwise expecting to go down paths of law. I think most of them ultimately ended up doing that. But just to hear them say, I just assumed that what was immediately in front of me in terms of being a lawyer and being maybe staying in Senegal or maybe going to France, that was the extent of what was possible.
Mm.
But the idea that I can find people who believe in something that I a change that I want to affect in the world, and they can support me to create that, and that can actually be my focus. Basically, again, like the idea of startup entrepreneurship.
Right.
There's like that was not in my arsenal, and now I
Mm.
know that that's possible. Like that was just, I mean, in terms of a particular pivotal moment for me,
Right.
where not only did I realize, yeah, this is what I want to be doing. I want to be encouraging other Black folks globally to want to create enterprises. And to be fair, I mean, 83% of this economy, for example, is informal, right? It's like
Right.
they're entrepreneurs about. But I think the concept of you know galvanizing, like I said, resources that you may not immediately have access to by way of revenue of your current enterprise, to
Right.
then create something bigger that has a bigger vision and potentially an international vision.
Mhm.
Um, that is there aren't as many people doing that as being farmers and things of that nature.
Right.
So yeah, that particular experience of finishing that chapter of what I call TGC, that was the name of the organization, or that's the acronym for the organization.
Mhm.
That's what fully crystallized. Like this is where
Crystallize.
I need to be. And
Right.
also the other thing too that I realized. I mean, and here's the thing. I mean, I think, I mean, like Elon Musk was saying, like we can appreciate any form of help that we can get,
Right.
right? So I don't want to suggest that the only folks who I think should be supporting great projects in Africa like need to be other Black folks. I'm not saying that whatsoever, actually. But something that I did find interesting was when I was in Senegal, looking around and just not seeing any other Black Americans who were representing America in different parts of private industry. There were some folks who I
Right.
met in diplomacy, but
Mhm.
I didn't see anybody doing any kind of um, you know
Private sector type of work.
at all, none.
Mhm.
I mean, even to this day, so like I said, I've now been in the continent for eight years, and I have met a total of four. other Black Americans. Just from from this idea of like trying to find your purpose, like a campaign that you can champion with ferocity and just
Right.
a sense of like fundamental like soul connection, if you will,
Mhm.
to borrow a Christian vernacular there. Like I I really connected with this problem from that perspective as well. I was like, wow,
Right.
like I mean, this is the heart of all Black people
Yeah,
come from here,
it's true.
right? There are
Mhm.
a lot of us, where I come from, but there are so few for different reasons who have made it back to work in different areas here. So that also has been a very major motivator for me, and kind
Right.
of like point excuse me, kind of point of confirmation that this is the
Mhm.
work that I want to be doing.
Yeah, that's good. It's interesting. I really like just that career path. I also like how you sort of like focused on a key experience or moment that you had that really, I guess, shaped your career, right?
Mhm.
So my next question for you is, like, what has been the biggest challenge in your life and career to date, and how did you overcome it?
Yeah. So the biggest challenge, frankly, for me has been um, choosing choosing my own truth above dogma
Mm,
slash the negative the negative feedback that I might receive from others, especially if I'm doing something that really is fundamentally novel, and that I've literally I've experienced that excuse me in different ways from different people at every key juncture of my career. So like
right.
after TGC had failed, I was in DC. Started off actually making salads at Sweetgreen.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I mean, for a few months, like
It's interesting.
as it was
Yeah,
becoming very clear, like
it's not
I would
working.
not be able to do this. I mean, and then what's interesting is that I then worked in a couple different companies over in the U.S., but
Hmm.
I had this my eye still set on getting in some form over to Africa.
Right.
Um, Ended up meeting this woman who, long story short, she didn't have the money to pay me when I met her. But then there were some other opportunities through this fellowship that she was a part of that I could have chosen, but I chose to volunteer to help her raise the money, however long it took. And
Mm,
then that took about a year and a half, 2 years. And then for that year and a half, 2 years, I stayed in the U.S. But then once we were successful in raising the money to justify me moving to join her, I then moved over to Casablanca, Morocco,
okay.
and
Interesting.
spent 2 years there, helping to start this venture capital fund called
Right.
Outliers Ventures.
Nice.
And I remember during that 2 years, I shared with anyone who wanted to listen, what my goal was, why I'm trying to get over to the continent, like my views that we're in just I mean even at that time, like before like startup entrepreneurship was really happening here,
Right.
like
Hmm.
I knew that
What year was this? Just for context?
this is uh this is 2015.
2015. Right.
2015. And yeah, I knew ultimately that there's really going to be. I felt that in the same way that startups had revolutionized so many different parts of private industry over in the U.S. Like I
Right.
knew that that same phenomenon was bound to happen immediately here,
Hmm.
and we need to be very careful. We as like Black people who care about the advancement of Black causes, like need to be very careful with how that happens,
Right.
because as the vice president of I believe it was Zambia had said when Zambia was getting their independence, he said, if we're not careful, the colonizers will come back as investors. Now, I think that there are a lot of again coming back to my point earlier about like we need as much help as we can get. We need as many like genuine allies, and frankly, I personally think that there's nothing wrong with international interests identifying where their how do you say this? Local interests identifying where international interests and theirs
Right.
are
With the
aligned,
synergy,
and
yes.
then you
Yeah.
build together. Like
Hmm.
I actually am okay with that. Um, but I but I nonetheless like even now in how I'm building my company now, I think it's very important that we're still careful to try to democratize. Like even as we're advancing, we're trying to democratize as much as possible
Right.
access to economic advancement through the enterprises that we have, and it's not
True.
all just going to international interests, right?
Right.
Which otherwise could very easily happen. So anyway, coming back to your initial question, so something that I thought was I just found it very frustrating was a lot of people who I shared this vision with would just kind of immediately poo-poo it.
Mm,
I mean, and like I said, this was at every juncture. So when I
right.
at first I was like, even to loved ones, I say,
Yeah. It's always tough.
I am going to get over to Africa. This opportunity came up for me to get over to Morocco. But then I remember my father asking me, "Yeah, but do they have money to pay you? Like, or when are you
Yeah.
moving?" And a lot of these
Mhm.
questions I didn't have yet. But I was also in my like early-ish 20s. I was like 23, 24. I was like, "Yeah, I'm
Right.
gonna figure it out.
Yeah.
I will figure it out." So
Yeah.
my favorite quote I think of all time is by Hannibal when some of his advisors came to him and said, "Boss, like this mountain pass is impassable." And he said, "We will either find a way or make one." And he
I mean,
he did. Like
it's true.
I apply that to everything. So here I remember like colleagues, just so many people just doubting me in different ways, saying, "Well, you're not. First off, you're not Moroccan, let alone Arab. Um, you're not Muslim. You learned French in school. You're not a native francophone person. You have no experience in venture capital, um, and you're not you haven't built and sold a company yet. Like,
Yeah.
how are you going to how can you possibly think how can you possibly think that you will be successful in such a campaign?" But I broke down the problem, which I think people should do in general when confronted with interesting questions like that. Like, what is the value that I need to provide?
Right.
And like, as in to provide now, right? So in Outliers Ventures case, the core value of the firm was the managing director's access to Moroccan markets, right?
Right.
And what she needed help with was just organizing deal flow and just thinking, like thinking, having someone to think critically about a lot of different companies very
Right.
quickly, which I was able to do. I believe, I think I'm, decently intelligent and so
Right.
forth. And so I was just breaking down the actual skills that I needed, and then like the mechanics of VC fund math you could
Right.
read in a book, and and I did do that.
True.
Um, again, coming back to your question around like what was the biggest challenge is being surrounded from time to time. With people who don't see the vision, and
True.
when you share with them what you're really trying to do, they don't support people
Mhm.
who you would definitely expect to be your some of your first supporters,
Exactly.
like friends that you had for a number of years. I'm saying, oh, like kind of like good luck with that.
Right.
And like I said, I experienced that at every juncture. So when I volunteered and people were kind of laughing at me, saying like, you're gonna move over to Morocco. Who's done that to go start
Exactly.
a VC fund? Like,
Mhm.
but did that right after that. I got into product. I worked at Paystack for a little bit in product management. Um, there, same thing. It's like, oh, you don't have. I mean, in the transition from Morocco to Nigeria, I didn't get as much blowback,
Right.
but there still was some. People
Some.
saying, "Oh, but you don't have X, Y, and Z," and then
Mm.
you just focus on what exactly do you actually need, and then
Need.
acquire
Right.
those things, and then and
Mhm.
then and then solve from the bottom up,
Exactly.
right? And then most importantly, actually, and most relevantly, I would say now, in starting my company, Alvin Technologies. So we do like I was saying at the very beginning, we do enterprise SaaS software to banks and asset managers, right?
Mm.
We have two offerings: embedded money management, what we call normative money management. So not just, hey Joe, here's a template for a budget, and figure it out yourself. But
Right.
every financial institution ultimately has a key. That would be redundant to say a core KPI that's in relation to behaviors that they want their retail customers to do.
Right.
Right. So banks want you to pay back on your loans on time with interest. Asset managers want you to save/invest consistently on time. Right.
Right.
So basically, one side of what we do on spend management is to help customers balance their spending around those obligations, and the other side is making it more convenient for you to access super app services in your whatever app.
Mhm.
And I remember at the very outset when the focus was money management, people saying, you'll be lucky if you could raise 50K for that.
Mm.
And I heard this, by the way, some of these things I heard from Africans. Remember that there were a couple of Kenyans. I want
Wow.
to make that very clear.
Yeah.
There were a couple. No, no,
Specifically, yeah.
not what I was saying, but what I'm about to say right now. There were a couple of Kenyans who said, Kenyans don't have any money.
Mm.
Kenyans, and also remember, it was a Kenyan man who said, if you were to present whatever budgeting support to um, a Kenyan man who otherwise has the option to buy a few Tusker beers or abide by his budget, even if you put in that budget his ultimate end goal, i.e., to buy land, he's always going to choose the beer. No one's going to pay attention
Mm.
to such a solution. You'd be lucky if you could even close one deal. Right? This was the feedback that I was getting at the very beginning.
Yeah.
And I'm a solo founder as well of the business. So,
Yeah. New
um,
country as well. So you're just pretty much taking new information as almost the gospel, right? You're sort of like seeing it as like that's what is expected, right?
Yeah,
Or
100%.
standard, right?
But I mean, even beyond that, I mean, and this is so far been helpful to me. But I just come back to my gut, like what
Right.
my gut, and then also my own market research, my own conversations with Kenyans,
Hmm.
both Kenyan just people, like consumers, as well as getting access to asset managers and speaking to them, access to banks, and understanding what's up, right? Um, but but ultimately, yeah, I mean, it has been. I guess I'm just. I mean, I'm about to turn 32 now. I guess I'm just used to this idea that if
Hmm.
a person is doing something that's actually novel, and the person say that say okay, whoever that person is speaking to hasn't done something similar,
True.
or they might have had dreams that were similar and just didn't have the.
Hmm.
I'm not gonna say balls because this could be women as well, but like
Right.
they didn't have the intentionality
Right.
or
Confidence, guts.
confidence, faith in
Right.
themselves
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
even try.
Hmm.
They will consistently be some of the first people to say, "Oh,
Hmm.
reasons why you'll fail."
Right.
So yeah, I would say the often negative feedback from, or even if it's not like directly negative, just doubt from those in my immediate vicinity, and not everyone. I don't want to say that because you know who you are, and I
Yeah.
appreciate your support. But otherwise, people who I would come in contact with frequently enough,
Yeah.
doubting what I'm trying to do, and just not being as supportive as I would hope. That would say is the biggest challenge, but definitely, by definition, a overcomable one.
Yeah.
Overcomable one.
Yeah, I mean, I can 100% resonate with a lot of the things you said, especially when it comes to the aspect of trying to do things or accomplish things or strive for things that are like people within your own community or within your the people you have around you, right, haven't really gone to accomplish or achieve, right? I know just like even in my own experience, like I've had a lot of like different circumstances, things like for example, like in my case, right, going to study in the US, right, abroad at a time when, like financially the means weren't really there, even though like I did get financial aid and a scholarship, but there was still like I just had that desire, right, that you had of like, you know what, I don't really care. I don't know how I'm gonna finish. I'm just gonna do the first year.
Right. Yeah.
And that
Sure.
was literally it. And literally, I remember I took a gap year. I worked at different companies. I raised funds for family, and I just basically I raised enough money just to cover the first year. And once I actually got there, now it was more like, all right, let's now try to actually stay here, right? So when
Sure.
you get there, it's like, okay, what on-campus jobs can I get, right? One of the things I did is I became an RA, right? Which
Hmm.
meant that my accommodation was covered pretty
Sure.
much for as long as as an RA, right?
Smart.
So it's that thing of like, similar to you, it's like you sort of like take it a step at a time. It's like, all right, step one, let me get to the country first
Hmm.
and see what I can figure out to then figure out what like the next couple of steps are
Hmm.
in the next journey, right? And the second piece that I think you really touched upon, it's like, that thing of like who you seek counsel from and who you
Sure.
get advice from.
Sure.
Something that I always try to like really live by. And it's something that like, a person we both equally know, it's like Alex Omozi. Like,
Sure.
one of the things he says is that like, never take advice from people who haven't done the things you want to do.
Sure.
Right. So I think for me as like a principal, I always like if I'm ever consulting someone, I'm always like, has this person done what I want to do? Or like, are they in a position that, or do they have something that I want?
Sure.
Then I'd probably ask them for an advice. But if not, if they have no context at all, then their advice, like it might be helpful, but it really lacks the context
Right.
completely. Right.
Hmm.
So that's the thing. So my next question for you is like just I guess similar on that tangent and everything, right? Is what advice would you give to someone who wants to do something similar to what you do?
Yeah. So I think the main thing that I would emphasize is the importance of getting one's mentality correct.
Hmm.
Um, there are plenty of resources out there that basically for any kind of technical skill that you want to learn, and also non-technical. Right? I mean, like sales you can learn, software engineering you can learn, data science, all these things, and all of the, I mean, product design, marketing. Like, there are a lot of different angles that a person can start off with or start off pursuing in order to ultimately get into startup entrepreneurship or becoming a founder. But I think the most important is getting your just getting your head focused,
Right.
understanding why you care about realizing a particular solution. There are a number of companies that I've seen both when I was evaluating companies for investment as a venture capitalist,
Hmm.
and then now just being in the space and hearing about different companies and their,
Right.
what they're doing. It's very clear. Actually, Sam Altman talks about this. He's like,
Hmm.
it's very clear when a founder gets to a point where they realize they don't maybe care that much about the solution, or even
Right.
if they care about the solution, like building the product, they don't care
Hmm.
about the customers.
It's true.
That's really critical. Like
Yeah.
that's
It's more
super,
like I think it's like the incentives aren't really aligned correctly, more or
hundred
less.
percent.
Yeah.
100%. Because I
Yeah.
mean, here's the thing. I've acquired different tools, in my journey, and that have been helpful for me to press forward when going through challenges. And one of those tools, without a doubt, has been this idea that if I'm getting if I feel like I'm just getting really bogged down with just sometimes like what feels like insurmountable challenges, or just a lot of them happening at the same
Yeah.
time.
Hmm.
Something I think a lot about is not just why am I doing this. I mean, I think everybody kind of like intuitively knows that, but I visualize what my customers' lives will look like when they're successful because of the
Right.
product that I'm creating,
Right.
and that gets me excited. That
Yeah.
usually pulls me out of whatever rut that I'm in. Like I
Hmm.
think often when we get into ruts, or at least when I get into ruts, um, it's because I'm allowing myself to focus too much on myself, or focus too much on my own personal issues, and not enough on the ultimate end goal. And
Yeah.
frankly, and I'm saying me to be careful, but I really do think that this is people in general.
Right.
When I see someone who's just really kind of frustrated about their life, I think what usually is missing, is they're allowing themselves to get excited about whoever is in their care becoming successful because of their contribution.
Yeah.
So yeah, that would be the first thing, is just really making sure that people focus on the mentality in terms of like practice resilience. Like you don't need to be a startup entrepreneur in order to just start practicing resilience. And there are many different ways of doing that. I think most importantly, pushing yourself in the gym. I mean, you and I both know this very
It's
well,
true.
right? Like if you practice actual suffering
Yeah.
every day, or at least 6 days a week,
Right.
where you're forcing your body to do something that it doesn't want to do
Exactly.
consistently,
Yeah.
um, then that naturally parlays into a stronger mind. That way,
Absolutely.
I mean, resilience that can apply elsewhere.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, so that's number one. Number two, though, I think in terms of how to actually develop that mentality, I
Hmm.
think it comes from a person really evaluating, sitting down, like cutting out the noise, cutting out the people who are irrelevant to your mission,
Right.
and just focusing on what do I personally care about.
Hmm.
What is the kind of value that I want to deliver in service to other people, and kind of work backwards from what you need to, sorry, where you want to be, and then work backwards to today in order to get there. Like it's
Right.
pretty straightforward, right? It's like the
Hmm.
idea of ikigai I find really helpful in
Yeah.
this regard, right?
Hmm.
This idea of trying to find as specific of a niche as possible, where it's in between, like say four different
Right.
components in,
What you
in a
love,
Venn
what you can make
diagram.
money from, and yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
What you're competent at,
Right.
or what you can become competent at, what
Hmm.
you like doing, what the
Hmm.
world actually needs, and then what the world is going to pay you for.
Exactly.
And I think by combining both of those, practicing resilience, understanding the why as far as what you're trying to achieve,
Right.
and for whom you're looking to achieve it,
Hmm.
you basically become unstoppable.
It's true. It's true. I think fundamentally, like what I come to realize, like just that key piece of just knowing exactly what you want,
Yeah.
aside of any influence or whatever, anyone could tell you or try to
Yeah.
like impact their own like understanding of reality or what they want out of their lives onto you. Because one thing
Hmm.
I've realized is that like
Mm,
you know, the people who are like I guess are your supporters or actually like, want the best for you, right? They don't necessarily want the best for you. It's more like they want the best version of yourself. Sorry, the best version of you that serves them.
right.
That's like, yeah.
Correct.
So that's what. So it's like, if when you get very very clear as to what you want, and then also like a very key thing you mentioned is like tying it to like a bigger purpose, right?
Hmm.
How you talked about how it's like whether it's like liberating, like in your case, like your customers, right? Seeing what impact the product and the work you're doing now will have on their lives, or what like the
Right.
ideal life will be for them,
Right.
right? It's very very similar. Like I think with me, it's like when I'm striving for things, I always think about like, okay, in a couple of years from now, like, my family, right? My descendant, like what sort of ideal life would I want to be able to create for them
Hmm.
or just through my own hustle and my own hard work, like what opportunities have I been able to create for them
Yeah,
because of
man.
it, right?
Preach.
So
Yeah.
yeah, it's that thing of like, you know what you want, but it's also trying to tie it to something bigger than yourself, like doing it for somebody else, right?
Yes.
It's that
Yeah.
sacrifice that's sort of like you it just makes it more of a selfless pursuit than it being
Mm.
like a very selfish pursuit in a sense.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
100%. And frankly, too, I mean, I hope I'm not, throwing in a concept that you might not have wanted to jump to immediately. But I also think that is the masculine orientation
Mhm.
is one of service, right?
Right.
It's like I mean, I define masculinity as doing what's required in order to be able to provide safety and security and ultimately more freedom to
Mhm.
those who are in your care.
Right.
Now, that doesn't necessarily mean it's like your employees or your kids. Like it could be a mentee, it could be kids in the neighborhood,
Right.
but just identifying who do I feel some level of like meaningful responsibility for,
Right.
um, and acquiring the competencies. And I think there are maybe four in particular that I think of that are a part of it. Like developing the core competencies that are required in order to deliver that
Mhm.
with a competitive spirit, or otherwise like wanting to wanting to actually do the actual ultimate best that
That
you
you
can
can.
do. I
Right.
think that's
Mhm.
super super important.
No, I agree. I agree. 100% I agree. Um, yeah, so I guess now like switching gears, so since you already like sort of
Sure.
brought it up, right? It's like, this next set of questions are a bit more personal, right? Before we get to the ones you just highlighted, I think the first question I want to ask you is, do you practice self-improvement? And if so, like what do you do?
Yeah, sure. No, 100%. So I do a few things, I guess, in that category. So first and foremost, I mean, a lot of the typical ones that a lot of people espouse online, and a lot of people I know you as well follow,
Right.
in terms of the importance of a daily cold shower in the morning, being consistent with forcing yourself to undergo physical suffering every day. Ultimately, that actually wasn't always the case. I mean, my goal was maybe 5 days a week and then have rest days, and now
Right.
every day
Every
I'm
day.
doing
Cold
something.
shower. Okay.
It's a cold shower for sure every day,
Yeah.
in the morning. But then, yeah, I mean, I'm in the gym five to 6 days. The
Hmm.
target's always six, but 5 to 6 days per week. And then on Sunday, I'll go for like either a very long walk, or I'll go for a run,
Right.
something of that nature. But force myself to sweat in some way every day.
Hmm. Hmm.
That's been very helpful. The importance of meditation. I don't do it
Hmm.
super consistently, but I try to at minimum do, like, even if it's like a 3 or 5 minute meditation on Headspace.
Right.
I
Right.
mean, it always pays dividends, especially if I do
Hmm.
it in the morning immediately after other components of my morning routine. Um, I I'm rather consistent with my bedtime as well. I know
Right.
you're, I think, the icon for the world in that regard. You go to bed at like 5:30, I believe.
Actually, 7 p.m.
So
7 p.m. Yeah. Don't be
yeah,
calling me after 7 p.m.
right, exactly. No, and I super super respect that, and just like I love that. I love that practice.
Right.
But yeah, so in my case, I well, so for me, it's a bit different because we have so for we are serving customers in Kenya and Nigeria right
Hmm.
now, and so even like into the distant future, like we have to kind of like adjust our work time here in order to serve
Right. Of
customers over there, to ensure that we're
course.
online. But otherwise, just being very consistent with not sleeping any later than, I would say, 10 o'clock, but I'm pretty consistently in bed by 9,
Hmm.
9:15. Um, I experiment with different diet approaches,
Yeah.
and I'm trying to do more
Yeah.
posting about that now on Instagram to kind of
Hmm.
share my learnings as
Yeah.
I'm
Actually, just like that's one of the things I actually wanted you to sort of expand on because you're now on a kind of
carnivore.
carnivore diet,
Yeah,
right?
it's true.
Yeah. So can you just like, talk about that experience a little bit? Like, how's that been? What made you even want to sort of adopt that diet? And I guess what are like, your own personal benefits that you've experienced just from that?
Sure, 100%. So today is day 33 of
Nice.
the diet, and um, so first, I mean, just to explain what it is. So a carnivore diet entails only eating animal products. Um, so beef, chicken, fish, pork, eggs, bacon, and butter.
Right.
I think that's basically all of them. For every single meal, no sides ever. And in fact, I mean, not even cooking in olive oil, right? Like if you're going to
Oh,
cook,
really?
like cook either in rendered beef fat or
Mm,
bacon fat or butter. And
interesting.
carnivore is a approach to dieting that's within the ketogenic family.
Yeah.
And it basically, I mean, it's part of the family of it's within the category of just low carb, right? Like
Hmm.
trying to minimize your carbohydrate intake as much as possible, and then trying to get maybe 60 to 70% of your calories from fat, and then the
Right.
remainder via protein.
Protein.
Um, and basically, what it does is it trains your body to use to look for fat and protein for energy as opposed to carbohydrate. So
Mm,
in most diets globally, they're carbohydrate based,
true.
which means that the body is used to burning off mainly carbohydrates until you don't have any more, and then you look, it's looking for glucose and glycogen and so forth.
Hmm.
But you then start craving more carbs rather quickly because
Right.
carbs are
Yep.
that's just kind of what happens.
Hmm.
So in the ketogenic orientation, namely within carnivore, you're kind of flipping that, and there
Hmm.
are two processes that are happening: ketosis for the transition from the body relying on carbohydrate for energy to fat, and then for carbohydrate to protein, it's like a nuclearogenesis, something like that. And what ends up kind of naturally happening is that your body starts to realize after about 20 to 30 days, that's what you call like the fat adaptation transitionary phase,
Right.
that whoa, if I have any fat on me, I can also look to that for energy. And so you just have like so many testimonies of people just like getting super shredded very
Right.
quickly.
Hmm.
And then and frankly, that kind of happened to me as well to a degree. So
Right.
like I said, today's day 33. I started off exactly at 100 kgs. I
Okay.
lost 5 kgs,
Wow.
largely of water weight and just like excess fat
Right.
in 25 days.
Yeah, that's
Like,
a lot.
yeah,
KG, that's a lot.
and
That's
to
a
be
lot
clear
of
too,
weight.
I'm trying to gain weight.
Yeah.
Just my target goal is like I want to be 110 kgs of just like
Right.
lean muscle, just like strong and competent and
Yeah.
from that
Yeah.
regard. So I was trying to up my caloric intake, and yet I still
It's still a
lost weight.
lot.
You
Wow.
know what I mean? So
Yeah. Yeah.
it really is. It's a really great. I mean, people ask sometimes like, oh, it's not sustainable. It's like, listen, okay, just first off, relax. No one. I didn't sign any document saying that I have to do this until I'm 85,
It's true.
and that's not the case for anybody else as well. It's just like, so.
It's
And
true.
so something coming back to your last question as well around my approach to self improvement. Something that I'm really big on, kind of akin to Tim Ferriss's orientation,
Hmm.
is just
Hmm.
acquiring tools that are relevant for me.
It's true.
You know what I mean? So this is now a really great tool that's now in my toolkit, and frankly, I do recommend it at least to explore,
Yeah.
to check out. I mean, I'm not saying that anyone should.
Exactly.
The point of this podcast is not to give
This
diet
is not
advice.
medical advice, by the
Right, exactly,
way.
exactly. Yeah, I don't want YouTube to have any issues,
Exactly.
but it does have a lot of benefits in terms of just being able to get rid of fat like super quickly.
Right.
One, two, since you're not eating any carbs, by definition, there's no carb crash in the course of the day.
Mm,
After
true.
my
It's a big
so
one.
my usual routine, part of the reason why we don't see each other in the gym actually,
Yeah.
is I as soon as I wake up, I immediately am on my computer and just like starting to work. And then I do my first breakfast, go to the gym, come back, do second breakfast, and continue on. But literally from the moment that I wake up, my energy level is more or less rather consistent in the entire course of the day. I mean,
Right.
it doesn't mean that you don't feel like psychological fatigue from just having to think through a lot of problems.
Mm,
I mean that anyone claiming that is peddling some kind of drug. Like it's like you still kind of naturally feel fatigue for the body, but that has been a super awesome benefit. It's like there's no like your insulin doesn't
true.
spike,
Hmm.
and insofar that you don't eat way too much protein, which sometimes actually I think I'm at the edge of, but so far I've been okay.
Okay. Right.
And then I have noticed improvements in terms of like anxiety management. People have find myself a pretty. I mean, I'm a pretty intense guy. I think, especially when I'm by myself. But like, I
Hmm.
find myself a pretty happy guy. So I don't really um, like I haven't seen like depression benefits so forth for myself right now, but I do know that for a lot of people, they're like, oh, it cured my depression and so forth. Like Jordan Peterson and his daughter Michaela spoke about how they have like an autoimmune condition, and going on carnivore, like they do the lion diet, which is you
Mm,
only eat beef, salt, and water. That's the
Oh,
entire diet,
that's
right?
wow.
But it's been helpful for them. So
Okay.
stress management, anxiety management, depression, and even and sleep quality as well. All
Right.
of those have been improved. Not to mention, like I said, it's never a bad thing to look more lean.
Yeah,
So yeah.
yeah, true, true. Interesting. So, okay, my follow-up question to that, still on the same topic of like self-improvement, right? Like, what is one area in your life right now that you feel you could improve the most on?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I really work towards the North Star of being
Hmm.
someone who holds very strong convictions, and for good reasons. I mean, I don't like having just kind of casual beliefs, and quite frankly, I don't respect people who have that kind of orientation. Um, but I try to hold them loosely, like this idea of
Right,
like strong convictions, but loosely held,
right.
and ultimately ultimately that is very helpful, and frankly I think it's rather critical for every founder to have that, because you're just kind of bombarded with all sorts of different types of like just questions where you can otherwise very quickly lose your way, or otherwise just get like deflated because of the challenges of trying to grow something to its ultimate potential.
Right.
But the flip side of that is that in some areas like those convictions can become so like you basically can create your own dogmatic orientation,
Mhm.
which is not always healthy. And I think in general, I'm pretty open to all sorts of different perspectives, but on certain kind of core pillars, as far as my beliefs on life, my beliefs on relationships between men and women, on religion, just like on a lot of things, I have very strong convictions, and I think some one area that I definitely I think. What I, not I think I know that I can and will be improving on in general is really evaluating the crux or the cruxes. I'm not sure what that word is, but
Right.
cruxes of those like strongest orientations are, and then
Mhm.
allowing for flexibility nonetheless.
Right.
I think that that's just good, from a perspective of never getting too arrogant, right? Or
Mhm.
and also hedging against being wrong,
True.
right? It's like even if a person accumulates a lot of evidence and then believes something very specific, there's
Mhm.
always a possibility that the person could
Of
be wrong,
course.
right? And so always allowing for, um,
Flexibility.
yeah, the flexibility, and then
Mm.
that process of finding or just being open to new perspectives, I think is important.
It's
So,
important.
yeah, that's an area of focus for me for sure.
Nice, nice. So my next question for you is, where do you see yourself heading in the next couple of years? Like what are some of the things you're like hoping to accomplish?
Yeah, so the core focus for us right now, frankly, is profitability for the company. So we did raise some venture capital funding. My orientation, frankly, both as a VC from before, but then also as a founder now, is I'm really big on doing the basics correctly, and trying to limit as much as possible the amount of outside cash that you need in order to actually get to net profit margins. I see
Right.
a lot of companies that honestly, good on them. I think there's a lot of there are a lot of benefits of just having more cash, even if you're more diluted, right? I mean, like
Mhm.
the average founder that's IPOs in the US, like they own less than 20% for sure, like, if not
Right.
like 10, So it's not to say anything negative about that orientation. Just mine has been, I really want to keep. So we've had a very deliberate. Um, like tight on the purse orientation as a business, because I want to get to that point first and
Mhm.
reward the investors who backed us at the beginning, and then be able to primarily be reinvesting in new products and new hires and so forth by way of revenue.
By
So that
revenue,
that's that's
right.
that's currently, I mean, frankly, that's like the only focus.
Yeah.
I mean, there are personal ones as well, in terms of from dating. I will need to date and so forth again, and all
Right.
this stuff. But
Yeah.
but right now, that is really the only priority.
Probably. Mhm.
Um, and then to the other part of your question, as far as where do I see myself in a number of years? So, like I said, I have really, really, really fallen in love with this country,
Mhm.
and its people and its
Mhm.
culture, and I'm just enormously grateful that all of these really great kind of pillars of the society exist, because I really have enjoyed it a lot. And there's a lot that I still want to give. There's more by way of service that I want to
Right.
give to the people of this region. So in a number of years, after my company Alvin hits its next milestones and is even more kind of well established in both markets. One is expanding the services that we're doing here to other places,
Right.
but then also just like deepening my roots here in terms of building things and whatnot. Like that's all in the future for sure.
Right, for
Yeah,
sure, for sure. Nice, nice. All right, so I want us now to revisit a topic that you sort of like touched on earlier, which is on like masculinity and being a man,
sure.
right? And I remember like one of the things you mentioned about like to you like being a man is it's like fundamentally rooted on like service,
Yeah.
right? So just like expanding on that a bit, like how do you navigate life um as a
Mm.
man from the perspective of service, right? Like what's your mindset, especially in your approach to a lot of things usually?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So, well, first, let me break down, I guess, more definitively what masculinity means to me. Right.
Right.
So, first and foremost, like I was, I think, touching on earlier, it means doing what's required to um, provide safety and security to others who are in your care. But then I think within that, there are a few kind of like key pillars.
Mhm.
Right. So the first one is um, well, we talked about physical strength. I guess I can put that first. That being number one. From physical strength, then there's like mental.
Mental.
Well, it's like like having like a stoic orientation
Right.
to life's problems, right? Just
Mhm.
not being too emotionally reactive to things. Which is
Right.
frankly, I mean, coming back to your question around things that I can improve on. That's another thing that
Mhm.
I'm very focused on. The third one though is financial competence, right? I
Mm.
mean, and if financial competence is part and parcel to reliability,
Right.
right? So that being number three, and then number four, it's kind of tied to the first one in terms of physical competence, but like the capacity for violence when necessary.
Mm.
Like I mean, as a lot of people have said before, there's nothing heroic or glorious or virtuous in my view around around not being able to fight, right, or
Mhm.
not being competent as a fighter. There again, an area where it's hard to balance like goals in terms of I'm getting big, but then at the same time I'm training for I did endurance sport and then also do
Right.
but that is something that I still value,
Mhm.
um, and I'm working to inculcate and or cultivate rather in myself. So based upon those pillars, I would say that coming back to your question, that my main my main focus ultimately is being very honest with myself, like brutally honest, like constantly, like
Mhm.
actually every week I do an evaluation
Right.
where I look at my progress against all these different areas,
Right.
and then just being honest where I'm falling up short against myself. Like there again, I think a lot of people um, don't don't do that with intentionality, and then
Mhm.
ask themselves like, why have I not advanced by as much as I would have otherwise liked to
Right.
later on. And I think, well, it comes from lying to yourself. And
Mhm.
I think a lot, and that's something that I try to avoid. I mean, I mean, sometimes it's like people who I share my progress with, like they'll say this. It's sometimes even too intense in terms of like, this is where I
Yeah.
was. This is not what's happening.
Right.
But ultimately, I think that that's a part of the masculine frame is
Mhm.
just honesty with oneself,
Right.
and then based upon that foundation, then being able to navigate life more with more precision,
Right.
right? It's like, okay, I was not doing this correctly before, and now I'm going to. I'm not going to try to do it. I'm going to do this next thing. I
Mhm.
may not succeed in the first trial, right? But I'll allow myself to continue to pivot along the way. So, in terms of how I navigate life as a man, I think yeah, just working to advance on all those fronts, and then again, really being careful to constantly check in with myself on,
Mhm.
are my actions, or even are my friends, are the people who I'm allowing to be in my orbit,
It's very
are
important.
they reflections of the best version of myself?
Right.
And that's actually in this current season been a very big theme.
Yeah.
Just realizing that there are people who, I mean, and people who are like plenty of, they're plenty impressive on their own, and they're doing cool things. But when I pay attention to like the texture of the conversations that I have with them,
Right.
or I mean, let alone like those who might disrespect you behind your back, like
Yeah.
they
There's
should
just like
be,
you don't even
yeah,
regard them at all. It's
exactly, you
like
should be disregarded anyway, like
yeah,
render them irrelevant.
exactly.
But even for those who otherwise could be in your orbit, just like I like to pay attention to what is the substance here,
Exactly.
and doing what I mean, I think it's fair to call it an audit. Doing an
Hmm.
audit of like who's really adding value, and not from an
Like
orientation of like being selfish, like, oh, people need to focus on,
give you, yeah.
yeah, but
Hmm.
people who even like, I mean, given where we are, I mean, I think it's relevant to use an example. Every conversation that you and I have had, we touch on so many different
Sure.
areas of like real growth, not just,
Yeah.
oh, bro, like how much is your bench now, or like how is it because you're doing boxing now,
That's.
let's get back.
Hmm.
It's like, but what's the next level look like? Like
Exactly.
excellent, bro. Like you hit this goal, like this goal, like that is what I am now working to really comprise 100% of my relationships.
Yeah.
And if I'm not getting that, again, not just one way, but if I don't feel like I'm able to return back, the same energy,
Right.
then like it's like, what are we doing here? So allowing for my relationships to the relationships that I really nourish, to just be within that category,
Hmm.
and then at the same time just doing more like introspective work. So I just bought this motorcycle
Right.
and just doing more solo rides where I go. And I don't even necessarily listen to music. A lot of times I'll have like a theme that I want to think about,
Hmm.
and I'll just think about that in silence for like 2 hours. And then
Interesting.
I'll arrive somewhere, and then I usually bring a journal, either a journal or my computer, and then I'll like synthesize it. Like that's
Right.
that's what I enjoy now.
Yeah.
As far as, well, life in general, but also that's been like that. Those processes that I was talking about have been very helpful for how I like navigate life as a ever evolving man.
Man, yeah. I like that. It's a very, very holistic response. Absolutely. Right. So we're pretty much coming towards the end of this conversation.
Sure.
Do you have any questions for me?
Yes. So one question is, so one could say that if you're born in a society that enables any level of like physical movement between cities, that you do have some level of privilege. Not
Hmm.
everybody's privilege is the same, but I think you and I both agree that this kind of like this automatic vilification sometimes with the notion of privilege is probably misguided, right? Because
Hmm.
everybody by definition is trying to acquire more privilege. So like
Sure.
privilege in and of itself as an end goal can't be an evil thing,
Yeah.
right? But I'm curious, just in your experience, when you've done this for a minute, and you've been teaching younger guys, how to think about. But you've been inspiring them, I think, to think about different kind of like parts of masculinity. I think in really healthy ways. I'm just curious though, like when if you were speaking to a guy who say didn't have the same access to opportunity that
Hmm.
that you did, what do you say to him? Like if you were to break down to like three things to
Right.
encourage him to, also like kind of your question to me about like what would you say to someone who's like, say, looking to get into startup entrepreneurship? What would you say to say a young Kenyan who's growing up, say in Nieri? I just really like I
Yeah.
like the landscape over there, so that's why it came to mind. But he's
Yeah.
going to
Yeah.
Nieri, and it's like, man, like Joe Karaoke is doing so many cool things. Like
Yeah. Yeah.
like he sounds like me. Like I think Nieri is also Kikuyu, right?
Yeah, it
So
is.
like
That's like
he
the sort of like a home. What do I put it? It's like for my ethnic, like my
oh,
people.
really?
Like Nyeri is like one of
I
the,
was spot on
regions.
accident. There you go.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
So imagine you're talking to a young guy there. He's like, 18 years old, and he's thinking about how can he possibly aspire to be like you.
yeah.
What would you say to him?
That's a good question. And I mean, there's a lot of things I can really touch on. Um, I think it's sort of like we sort of spoke of this earlier in the conversation, right? The first thing is, of course, just get very, very clear as to what you want and what you want to aspire for, right? And then the second piece to that would probably be like expose yourself to either people who are in that environment or even if it means like moving locations, right?
Hmm.
If you have the opportunity, like if for example this person's based in Nyeri, right, this guy, like if you're able to figure out a way to move to the city, by all means, like take that opportunity, right? And and just be around people and places that sorry, be around people that can more or less help you to get the things that you want, right? So I think the first thing is getting clear about what you want. The next thing is like, being around in those spaces or environments, or even having those people in your life, whether it is, moving locations, or even just like having conversations with like people, like what it's like for example, here's a point. Like one of the things I used to do when like I was like 15 years old, I used to just DM and like LinkedIn message and
Mm,
cold email just a bunch of like entrepreneurs, investors, just sort of because at that time like I was till today. I mean, that's probably where like my passion for entrepreneurship came, right? Is I'll message, email a bunch of like investors, like entrepreneurs, people who run like founders, just basically trying to pick their brain, send
mm,
them a bunch of questions. So they'd send me all sort of responses. And I think just through reading that, it more or less like shaped my mind on things.
mm,
And one of the fortunate things from that experience is I actually ended up getting an internship
hmm.
working at a startup here in Kenya, right? Based off just me just emailing and being like,
There you
hey,
go.
I want to learn about business. Can you teach me? I'm
Mm,
willing to work. You don't have to pay me. And like surprising thing is like I remember like I came in one day for the interview, arrived on time, and he's like, "Yep, we'll hire you on. We'll pay you a small stipend, and we will like we'll teach you." And at that time, like I had no skills. Like I'm a high school student, like no
mm,
degree, nothing, right? So like the beauty about it is I got exposure to every side of business, right? I was doing marketing, I was in like product development, and not only that, like I had the privilege. And like, I mean, today is probably one of the best opportunities I had, right? Of sitting in on leadership conversations. So one of the things he did is that
hmm.
whenever he's meeting with his CTOs and CEOs for lunch, he'd be like, "Hey Joe, come. I just want you to take notes.
There you go.
Just listen." Right. So it's like I honestly think like don't like know what you want and then just like aggressively and ruthlessly go after it. Right. Don't let anyone tell you anything differently. Right. Especially when it's people who haven't really achieved the things you want. Um, send that email, start that business, shoot that shot basically is what I'm
Sure.
trying to say. It's
Mhm.
like just really go after it because what you realize is like when you make that first step, all the 10, 20, or 30 steps become a lot easier to
Right.
achieve, right?
Exactly.
So the first step you make, step 5 becomes a lot easier, then step 10, then 20. So I mean, if I was to tell, going back to your question about like this young man based in Nyeri, it's like be very very clear about what you want, and then just like do all that you can to just go out go after it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's moving location, whether it's reaching out to people, whether it's like also exposing yourself to the things you want. So it's like, reading the right books, listening to the right podcasts, and just sort of like developing your mind towards helping you achieve the things you want. Because the reality is like all these things together are more or less like tools
Mm-hmm.
that you add yourself, and it more or less gives you, for one, it gives you more competence to be able to achieve the things you want. And through competence you're able to develop like confidence, right?
Sure. Right.
Which is like that's when you actually believe and you actually think like, what, like I want to be a founder running a, let's say, as a hypothetical, like $100 million like valuation company. Like when you're already in that space and like you've had a couple of bit of experience, you've talked to various uh founders who have companies that are worth 100 million plus, you realize that like it's quite possible. Because the thing is,
Mm,
especially it's something I even experienced a lot when I went abroad. It's like, you know um I would go to school and I'd a lot of my classmates came from very like a lot more privileged backgrounds than I came from, right? A lot of these kids had like, their parents are hedge fund managers, those kind of things, right? From Connecticut, those kind of places,
sure.
right? And a lot of I'd see like their lifestyle and things that they experience and things the opportunities that they would get just based off of like, just how they grew up and a lot of
Sure.
the facilities they had. And like that in a lot of way, like I was never bitter, but I was very inspired by
Mm,
it because I was like, wait a minute, like, you mean people live like this? You
mm,
mean people do these things? And like the difference between myself and them is that they're obviously like privileged and being born in those environments, but that doesn't stop me either way for being able to get those sort of opportunities as well. Because
mhm,
I know that I just need to like work my way, or I need to just do certain things over a couple of years to get access to those sort of facilities, right?
mhm,
So I fundamentally think like exposure is so important because like it really just opens your mind on like what is possible for you,
mhm.
right?
100%. One thing I would also add on top of that, just to dovetail, is I would also encourage such a young guy or young woman to reframe potentially their thinking or on the assumption that it must be Herculean, like it must require like a Herculean amount of effort
Right.
in order to get it. Like one kind of notion that I think is helpful in this regard is if you think about, say, like, I don't play video games, but I do know that there are some people who are like ultra good at
Right.
Call of Duty and uh, the Warcraft game and so forth, and they can even get paid to do it.
True.
A lot of people play, few are at that level, right?
True.
Now, one could say, oh, well, I mean, that means that I have a 1% chance of getting to that level.
Hmm.
And what's kind of implicit in that statement, in that limiting belief, is the idea that there's some kind of outside force which is going to be greater. That's gonna hold more weight against me
Mm.
than the power that I have within me in order to actually get there. And
Right.
therefore, I might as well not try, or I'm very unlikely to succeed.
Succeed.
But
Right.
the reality is, only 1% of all people, say, playing these games are willing to commit enough time to get to that
Exactly.
level, which means that it actually is about a personal conviction, like a personal decision
100%.
to do the work that's required. Like,
100%.
you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And
100%. I
that
agree.
concept, I think, it literally applies everywhere. And something that, people disagree with me on this, and that's fine. I believe it anyway. Something that I find very helpful is just insisting on positive mental models that serve
Absolutely.
me in some form toward my goals,
Hmm.
even if it's untrue. Right. So,
True.
for example, when we were raising capital the first time, and um, we were going to different investors and different investors globally, so Kenyan ones, Nigerian ones, European, American, and so forth. If an investor said no to the opportunity, and say the investor was Caucasian, I wouldn't literally, not for a moment would I ever think, oh, it must be
Mm.
because I'm a black guy. And they knew that I was from the South Side.
Yeah.
No,
You wouldn't. Yeah,
and
exactly.
and to be fair, I really don't think that is like an undertext, like very often. Let me just say that. But even if it
Yeah.
was, I wouldn't allow for that to even be a possibility in my head. It's like, no,
Absolutely.
it's probably because I did not do something.
Yeah.
This idea that things, positive things as well as negative things, are my fault.
Exactly.
If a customer says no, say, to working with Alvin, or actually, you know, tend to get a lot of like straight up no's. Might be like a not yet, or like we'll schedule it later. But
Yeah.
if we say like just like a flat out no, and I know that our offering really should be kind of like appreciated by their firm as being
Right.
helpful to their ultimate objective.
Right.
I take that as a personal. I mean, it's personal feedback. It means that I
Hmm.
did not articulate the value well enough early
Hmm.
when it came to the investor example. I did not pitch the company, or I didn't present myself, or the business, whatever, the
Yeah.
market, whatever it is. It was on me. So one of the things that I mean, actually, part of the reason why I asked that question is because from time to time, I find myself talking to different guys. I have a couple of mentees, and I get questions that are kind of adjacent to that one in nature,
Hmm. Hmm.
and that's like, and again, per my point earlier about the importance of getting your mentality right.
Right.
That, once again, is like another tool that I think people should have in their
Yeah.
arsenal. Like, just remembering, one, even if I see not many people doing the thing that I want, like, well, first off, it can be broken down. Like there's always a best next step.
Exactly. Hmm.
Like anywhere,
True.
you be born in Papua New Guinea, you can, like,
Literally, there's
one by
one
one plan your
layer
way
up.
to ultimately be able to afford a ticket
Yeah.
to get to a it's like there's always a program. One, and two, um, like, just remembering that, how do I say this? It's like it's even if there are a lot of forces against you,
Yeah.
that ultimately focusing on what you can control, and then being maniacal about it. Like, I remember there was a company I worked at in New York, and I had a poster on my desk that says "Be obsessed, be obsessed, be
Be
obsessed,"
obsessed.
and
Hmm.
people kind of tease me for it. I was like, but it was helpful because I wanted to be like the actual
Right.
best at what I was
Right.
doing. Like, I
Hmm.
wanted to I wanted to see extraordinary results for myself and
Hmm.
those who I care about. So my advice to that same kind of like fictional person, is, yeah, just like is being just really, really, yeah, just really, really maniacally obsessed about
Yeah.
literally optimizing everything that's in your control. And then by doing that, whatever it is that you want to achieve, like, you almost
You
inevitably
can.
will achieve
Yeah.
it. Or at least that's the mentality I think to have.
Yeah, no, definitely agree. I want to build up on what you said, but I want to just rephrase it differently. I would actually say, just building off of what you're saying, it's really much just about like taking full responsibility for what
Right.
you can control,
Right.
right?
Right.
I would say the added layer to this as well is that, even though you do take full responsibility for everything, like, also understanding, because it's a very delicate balance as well, right? That there's some things that you just can't control. Like,
Mhm.
it's not your fault. Like, it
Sure.
wasn't your responsibility. Like, for example, in cases, let's say, where you have gotten clients where they just told you outright no, right? and like, you did the best pitch possible, you analyzed the company well, like you clearly did everything that you could do within your power
Yeah.
to put your best foot forward, right, in that certain engagement. And sometimes you realize that like maybe it's just not you, it's that person,
Sure.
right? They're just not a right fit for you.
Sure.
And like in that moment, once you realize that, you can always just like take comfort in knowing that the right person or like the right opportunity will present itself,
Sure.
provided that you're always like doing your best at whatever you're trying to achieve, trying to accomplish, right? You're bound to find something that or someone or some type of opportunity that synthesizes with what you're trying to achieve for, right? Because like that is like, I mean, there's over what 7 billion people in the world. It's like, like you don't have to just like rely on let's say that specific person who tells you no, right? There's just like more than, I'm sure there's within your market, there's like thousands of
Sure.
like potential customers, right?
Sure.
Yeah. So even like, which I think it's also very, very important to like going back to what you talk about conviction, right? Being very, very, very clear with like what you want and your conviction, because naturally what happens is that those people who align or who are in support of what you're trying to do, they will find you.
Sure.
Yeah,
that's fair. No, 100%. And I think, frankly, that's a realistic orientation, like, for sure, and therefore a very helpful one too. I think this was what I was trying to promote, though, is this idea that even with that being the case, like factually,
Yeah.
that's the case, right?
Yeah.
After every single point of feedback, like, well, first off, if it's a yes, great, I have opportunity. If it's a no, it's feedback. Like I still win, right? Like, the Hormozy 101 concept, right? But what I think is still helpful is after every no, still thinking, what could I have done better about that presentation? Like presentation, pitch, whatever it is, because that then forces you to constantly be in an orientation of self-evaluation.
Exactly.
As opposed to, because I think a lot of people just will too casually default to that.
True.
Right. And say, oh, well, it just wasn't for me.
Yeah.
Even like, say personally too, like, oh, so and so just doesn't care, or this girl just isn't for me. It's like, well,
right.
Did you evaluate all the things that you could have done
Exactly.
to achieve the outcome that you wanted? It was like, well, and that's the thing. I kind of by nature never allow myself to answer that with a full-on yes. Like, there's always something.
There's always something. Yeah.
There's
Absolutely.
always, like, even sitting here in this podcast, like, after this, I already know I'm going to do an evaluation on how much did I stutter,
Likewise.
or like, pause before. It's like there's always evolution,
things you can improve on. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Which I know I agree with you. It's 100%. This is why I said this, like, it's such a very delicate balance.
Sure.
Right. Between figuring out like ways of always wanting to improve, right? Versus also making sure that you align with the right individual, the right vehicle, the right opportunity that is more or less will more or less be that guiding force, or more or less like steer you towards the things you want to achieve eventually.
100%.
Right?
100%.
Yeah. All right, man. Dude, we're pretty much at the end of this conversation.
Sure.
Thank you so much for joining us. Is like, where can people find you?
Yeah, sure. Well, first off, thanks for having me. Really enjoyed this conversation, just like all the ones that we've had before. Yeah, and you can find me on Instagram at Becoming Winston Reid. So that's at Becoming Winston Reid. And then on LinkedIn, it's Winston, I believe, D Reid, Winston Reid on there. And then I have a website, winstonreid.com. So via those avenues, you can get connected.
Yeah. And I would say, actually, on top of that, check out Alvin if you want to, like, just like, obviously, like, check out his like organized company he runs, Alvin. I'm sure all the socials are linked on your page and things like that.
Right. And if you want, exactly. If you want to check out the company directly, then that's alvin.finance.
Right. All right. Thank you so much. Right, everybody, this has been an episode of AlphaDelta, a podcast where we have conversations with people who operate at a higher level than most. I'm your host, Joe Kareki, and I'm here with my guest, Winston Reid. And it's goodbye for us, and we'll see you the next time. Peace.